Morning all. There is one Fischer against Tal game missing actually from this channel, and I'd like to look at that this morning. It's actually an Olympiad final game. I have a great fascination with the Olympiads. These are the major team events, country against country. In 1960, this was actually Bobby Fischer's first Olympiad that he played at. It was at the Leipzig Olympiad, so the 14th Chess Olympiad, organised by FIDE, was a team tournament as well as several other events designed to promote chess. It took place between October 26th and November 9th, 1960 in Leipzig, East Germany. The Soviet team of 6 GMs were led by the world champion at the time, Mikhail Tal. He just defeated Botvinnik, so he was the current world champion, and he lived up to expectations and won their 5th consecutive gold medal, with the United States and Yugoslavia taking silver and bronze respectively. Okay, so in Olympiad play, how was Mikhail Tal? Well, Mikhail Tal was a member of 8 Soviet teams, each of which won team gold medals: 1958, 1960, 62, 66, 72, 74, 80 and 82. Mikhail Tal won 65 games in these Olympiads, drawing 34 and losing only 2, believe it or not. One of them was to the British player Jonathan Penrose, and that was an excellent game in the Benoni, which I think I'm going to have to show you at some point. The percentage actually makes him the player with the best score among those participating in at least 4 Olympiads. Individually, Tal won 7 Olympiad board medals, including 5 gold, 1958, 62, 66, 72, 74, and 2 silver, 1960 and 82. Okay, how was Fischer's record? Okay, Fischer refused to play in the 1958 Munich Olympiad. That's why he didn't play in 58. His demand was turned down that he, the reigning US champion, should play board 1 ahead of Samuel Rzewski. But according to some sources, he was unable to leave attending high school to play in Munich. However, he represented the US in this Leipzig Olympiad in 1960, and US ended up coming second, with silver. And Fischer himself on the board got the bronze prize for his board prize, but US got the silver. In Varna 1962, Fischer came 8th on his board performance, and the US came 4th. Havana 1966, Fischer got silver. This is one of his best performances, and the team got silver. In Siegen 1970, Fischer got silver, and the team came 4th. So his overall total was winning 40, losing 7, drawing 18. So he had got 75.4% in Olympiads. In 1966, which was the Havana, he narrowly missed the individual gold, scoring 88.23% to world champion Tigran Petrosian's 88.46%. He played 4 more games than Petrosian, faced stiffer opposition, and would have won gold if he accepted foreign Georgiou's draw offer in the penultimate round rather than declining it and suffering his only loss. He had planned to play for the US in the 1968 Lugano Olympiad, but backed out because of the poor playing conditions when he saw the poor playing conditions. Okay, so, by the way, there's one more thing I want to say about this game. Fischer and his mother left him in the New York apartment with a high crime rate, but despite the alienation from her son, Regina Fischer in 1960 staged a 5-hour protest in front of the White House, urging President Dwight Eisenhower to send an American team to that year's Chess Olympiad, so set for Leipzig, East Germany, behind the Iron Curtain, to help support the team financially. So an amazing political backdrop and circumstances. The young Fischer facing Tal. He kicks off with e4. And Mikhail Tal plays actually a surprising move, perhaps, e6. I say surprising because you think tactical players, which Tal is considered like a tactical magician, would maybe not play so much defences like e6, more strategic in nature. I think Tal's influence from Botvinnik did make him more strategic in his games later on, though. Okay, the French defence, a solid, rock-solid defence. d4 from Fischer, and actually Fischer chooses the winner variation, so he favoured this winner, allowing the pin rather than the Tarrasch, which avoids the pin on bishop b4. You know, c3 can be played. So it's inviting the pin, bishop b4. So the winner with variation e5, c5. And now Fischer plays a3. And usually black plays bishop takes c3 check. This is the most common move, just to double the pawns. Mikhail Tal did a lot of research on this system. But there is a surprise weapon. So this is over 7,000 games in my live book. But the surprise weapon played was bishop a5. And there's actually over 1,000 games played with bishop a5. My good friend Alex Efelontis actually played this with some success. It's a very interesting surprise weapon. White needs to know what they're doing here. The most theoretical, most used move in this position is to play b4, and Fischer did play b4. Okay, you might wonder, what is this all about? While we're here, let's have a look a little bit from a theoretical point of view. If c takes b4, and I'm going to put on the capitula as well, c takes b4, white has knight b5. That's the idea, to quickly get into d6. It threatens now knight d6 check, and also bishop d2 is very useful to try and regain this pawn. What does black play here? If b3 check, we can play bishop d2, and we don't mind the bishops coming off here. So this is one of the ideas, that the knight can come to d6, and white's going to have good play here, very good play here in this sort of position. So that's one of the ideas for b4. Mikhail Tal didn't take on b4 here. He played actually c takes d4, and it's very, very sharp, this position. The most theoretical move in this position is knight b5, actually, it seems, with 483 games. Queen g4, which was played, is 319. So just a quick example, knight b5, this could be a continuation, where white has some weaknesses on the queen side. Clearly black's got that f5 square, and it's just an interesting game. There's been quite a few games from that variation, but here we see not in this position c takes d4. We see the alternative, the main alternative, with 319 games in my live book, queen g4. So very, very sharp, going for that g7. This bishop leaving, you know, f8 was protecting g7. This is often targeted in French defense winnower lines. This kind of, not so much a poison pawn. Well, it's often the poison pawn, with black winning by casting queenside and using the g file. Is it so poisoned in this game? Well, let's see. Knight e7. Okay, and we have an exchange of the bishop there on a5 for the knight on c3, and now white continues with queen takes g7. So fearless play from Fischer, really testing black to the limit with this, forcing black to play this gambit of g7 for a lot of pressure. But black is trying to put pressure on e5 and castle rapidly here. Okay, so how is this pawn to be protected? Knight f3 is played. I think that's one of the better ways of protecting the pawn at the moment. Now let's just quickly look at bishop f4. I think queen takes a5, then maybe queen a4. This bishop might be a target. So knight f3 is a logical way of protecting e5 for a moment. Queen c7. And now there's two ways of protecting e5 which are of interest. Fischer actually played bishop b5. Interestingly here though, on Livebook and Engine View, bishop f4 is the most dominant move. 105 games with bishop f4 to protect e5 here. Bishop b5 only 9 games. And it's actually meant to offer an advantage here to play bishop f4. In fact, I don't really want to run a detailed reference check. I just want to show you the main move, bishop d7. Now a6, believe it or not, b6, bishop drops back, black castles queenside, bishop d3. Still quite a few games here as an example. But it could, so the queen is about to get out now, back. It's not a perpetual attack on the queen. And there's 4 games even from here. but white is slightly better, even if black, does this exchange sack. This kind of position is interesting. There's quite a few different games here. Rook b1, f4, queen f4, queen e3, queen f6 are all from this position. So that's the sort of thing that can result from protecting the pawn with bishop f4. It's highly theoretical. So bishop b5 is a rarer bird. Bishop b5 pinning the knight for a moment. It seems a bit of a tactical liability actually after bishop d7 because black's immediately threatening. It looks as though black's threatening. Knight takes e5 just to snag that pawn. But Fischer probably prepared this line and just casually castled here, allowing knight takes e5. You might think, well, knight takes e5 is actually still the most common move for black anyway. So what would happen? Just very briefly look. Knight takes e5. Queen takes. Now the engine view is different from the live book. In live book, most human players just take on d7 routinely here. So there's 6 games with bishop takes d7. The engine actually prefers more cold-blooded move rook b1. So I wonder why, in fact. So say castling. Now the option to take on d7. I guess it's a little bit more flexible to play rook b1 here, but there's adequate compensation, it seems, for white. The engine view is actually giving it okay for white. But anyway, Tal maintains the tension of knight takes e5. He just castles queenside here. Okay, and now we have some options for white. Fischer actually chooses bishop g5. I think this is quite interesting. There seems to be a number of interesting options here. So his move, bishop g5, has the threat of taking, maybe taking, then queen takes f7 on the e7 knight. So this looks like an unpleasant move. Other alternatives, okay, let's have a quick look here. This looks like a very forceful idea. Bishop takes, queen takes. So it's actually on e6 here, and this is quite greedy, this continuation. But will it pay off? Because now rook takes g2, for example, and we're going to win that queen potentially. Rook takes f3, very, very sharp stuff. Bishop g5. But here, technically, it seems white might actually be doing quite well here. It's hair-raising stuff. This kind of continuation, being greedy here with bishop takes c6. So very forceful continuation to win not just f7 but e6. And if knight takes here, then bishop g5 on d8. If that moves, then white has got an interesting position. It looks to be okay here as well, this type of position. So anyway, very complex. In the game, after casting queenside, we saw bishop g5. And Mikhail Tal now here, knight takes e5. I think this is one of the better moves technically from an engine point of view anyway, just to play knight takes e5 here. So what is going on? Well, one thing to notice is this g-file is pretty dangerous. So for example, white could get mated, I think, like nearly mated. Knight takes f3 check, king h1. Rook h8 is very unpleasant, absolutely losing for white. End of game. So that's to be avoided. So, in fact, I think one of the only other moves apart from knight takes e5 here is bishop takes d7 first. Rook takes d7. Now knight takes e5, queen takes, bishop takes e7. And here you see there's tactics on h2, so rook h8. And we get a situation like this, potentially. These are all very, very forcing, this is about equal, very forcing continuations stemming from knight takes e5. So knight takes e5. So anyway, Fischer actually chooses here, instead of bishop takes, he gives black 2 options by playing knight takes e5. Also this bishop can take on b5 here, as well as queen takes e5. And it's actually bishop takes b5, which was chosen by Mikhail Tal. So seemingly punishing this bishop b5 innovation a little bit. He's on the rook here, it seems, but that's ignored. White here, okay, has a number of options. If bishop takes, queen takes. Let's have a quick look at rook fb1, queen g5, g3, bishop a6. This is complex stuff, but it looks as though technically it's about equal, believe it or not. Okay, so let's go back. Instead of moving this rook, Fischer actually just played knight takes f7, attacking d8 here. Okay, and so we see bishop takes f1, knight takes d8. And now, instead of taking the knight, the bishop's taken, rook takes g5. So, mass exchanges for the moment. And he's on g2 here, it seems, but that's ignored. Fischer plays knight takes e6. In fact, that looks to be one of the only moves in this position. He looks to be a knight down here on rook takes f1. King takes d8, or queen takes d8. That does to be looks to be a knight down, so he has to play knight takes e6. So he's forking for the moment queen and rook, and he needs to regain his piece here. Okay, let's do a sanity check here. So Fischer at the moment is a bishop down. He's forked queen and rook, and there does seem to be seemingly dangerous, extremely dangerous rook takes g2 available from that bishop on f1. Okay, and you see why actually this game is described as some commentators as very sharp and also pithy. So that means very concise, terse, like struggle, very forceful in nature. Very, very forceful encounter so far after knight takes e6. So what's going on here? Black really has to play now rook takes g2 check, it seems. He can't do a spectacular queen sacrifice. I know it's Mikhail Tal, but if he tries something like bishop takes g2, let's have a quick look at this position. If the queen is taken, actually this favours black, bishop e4 check. So actually this would favour black. Very interesting possibility. Black's doing massively better here. Still a piece up and doing very, very well. So actually this needs to be carefully considered here. After bishop takes g2, what would have happened? Well, white here just actually ignores the queen sack and just plays knight takes g5, and now white's doing very well. He's actually just the exchange up for not much, and this bishop has got limited squares here. So bishop e4, knight takes, and in fact there's even king safety issues. So this is more than the exchange up actually, because we've got an outside passed pawn, so that's unplayable for black. So an interesting idea to sacrifice the queen here by after this fork, seemingly giving black some opportunities to do something interesting. But rook takes g2 seems absolutely forced, and Mikhail Tal plays that. Now again, we're at crossroads here. Do we really want to take the bishop, or do we want to play king h1? Let's imagine in the game actually king h1 was played. Okay, so what happens after king takes f1? Black has here, doesn't have to move the queen. He's got options. He can take this with the rook, or he can take with the queen, but taking with the rook seems best. Attacking the queen here, and there's no check on either of these squares. Let's imagine knight takes c7 leaves black a lot better, because after rook takes there's still a threat of rook h1 check. So this is basically winning material, because that'll be winning that rook. So that's no good. So in this position, queen f7 though, ignoring the power of rook h1 check, or does it? Well, king g2 here is the best move, and now this rook would be immune because of queen e8 mating. Now in this position, if king e2 though, that's asking for trouble because of queen c4 check, and white's getting mated like this. So very precise moves are needed in each of these forcing sequences after king f1. But rook takes h2, it seems to overall be better after queen f7, check, king g2, queen h2 check is the move here to try and give black something. Check here, and you don't really want to play like this as white generally, with your king marching up the board. It's generally a bit scary thing to do. Oh dear, this is a very strange engine variation with the king on d6 and knight on e6. Yeah, this is just an engine continuation, and apparently black's slightly better. So let's go back. So basically, king takes f1 in a nutshell. Though rook takes h2 seems to be good for black. Whatever happens here, even after queen f7, it still seems to be good for black. Okay. Let's also just check out queen takes h2. So what would happen here? White actually doesn't just have to, although it's really scary on f2 and for rook g1s, it seems white is not necessarily forced to play queen takes h2. But let's have a look at this one. Rook takes h2, king e2. This position seems slightly equal from an engine point of view. It's equal on pawns technically. White's got that blockading knight. This should be okay, I think, for both sides to be able to hold a draw. But there's also a very interesting continuation if we go back on queen takes h2 for white to play queen f7 here in this position. So it protects f2 and it threatens this rather deadly queen e8 if given another move, queen e8 mating. So I think the checks here are fairly harmless and probably damaging to black to play that check. Here black doesn't want to play the check here. Black has to play very accurately. So the kind of prophylaxis move against queen e8, king d7, and this should be holding the balance here. It's check, check, and we're holding the balance here. If king c6, this is big trouble actually. Check, queen d8 check, queen takes e7, and white's really ending up winning this. Well, in fact, surely simplest is just taking here, and white's just a piece up. So queen f7 is a viable alternative as well, strangely enough, in this position. After queen f7, this seems to hold at least a draw as well. So queen takes h2 is a very interesting possibility as well to consider in this position. Also, it all takes off after king takes f1, these possibilities of rook takes h2 or queen takes h2. I don't think anything else will do in the circumstances with the rook hanging here. So in the game we actually see Fischer playing king h1. Still, white is temporarily a whole piece down. The bishop is supporting the rook though, so if it's eliminated, this rook is then emprise, so giving white extra time potentially. So Mikhail Tal needs a very good move here. What does he want to do? In fact, queen d6 might be possible to be played. Queen e5, still the idea of attacking this knight, that's the key thing, to get a counter attack against the knight. Rook takes f1. So does the rook want to move here? Let's see. can the rook go to, say, g6? That puts more pressure on the knight. So queen takes e7, rook takes e6, check, rook e8, queen f3. This should be, apparently it's okay for white still. It's about equal here, from an engine point of view anyway. It's about equal. But in the game we get a much clearer cut finish after this queen e5. Mikhail Tal doesn't play rook g6, he just goes for the perpetual check. He plays queen takes e6 here, so after king takes g2, check, and we have a perpetual check scenario. Okay, with the perpetual check like this all the time. So a very interesting clash there on board one for their respective countries in 1960. As it turned out in this match, the first 3 boards were drawn. So Lombardy, GM Lombardy drew with Botvinnik on board 2. IM Byrne drew with Korchnoi. I assume Robert Byrne, not Donald Byrne, drew with GM Korchnoi on board 3. And on board 4, unfortunately, Bizgua managed to lose to Smyslov. So the US team lost, unfortunately, by a narrow margin in this particular match. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.